like I say, a lot of people that are trying to get into the market, but with us holding the patents outside the market, there's nobody can do that. But when I first started researching it, there was nothing out there, and had a couple different companies do prototyping for me, and chose the best one that I could find.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and prior to owning your business, what were you doing?
Yeah. I grew up on a big dairy farm up in Michigan, and got to be 17. I didn't want to milk cows for the summer, so I joined the Army and went to boot camp, and came back, graduated high school. The next year, I decided to go in the Marine Corps. So I went through boot camp again. And stayed in the service, and then I got out of the service, and I ended up getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I got cancer, and I spent 4 years dealing with that, with 23 surgeries later. After that, I got into the insurance industry and owned a few restaurants in the side. And then one day I was driving down the road and had an allergy attack while I was driving, and almost got killed by a semi. And when I could finally stop sneezing, the semi was in the median and I was in the ditch. And I finally got to where I could breathe again. I'm looking up, and all I could see was dust particles in the sunlight. And I said, well, I don't want that to ever happen again. So I got to find a way so it doesn't, because it was a real realization. And so then I started thinking, and I started with like shower rings in my nose with filters on them and different things. And every time you put something in your nose, it reduces the breathability and all of that. So then I finally came up with the idea of outside the nose, made some by hand, tried them out for a while. They worked really well. Started doing research on adhesives and stuff, contacted a manufacturer, had some prototyping done, started applying for patents, and that was 20 years ago. And, so it was just evolution of experiences that created it.
Man, you're a true survivor over there.
You gotta fight.
Was there something similar at the time when you created the product, or
no? There actually wasn't. Since I created the product, and once I was on Shark Tank, there's been I think 11 or 12 different products come on the market, but I hold patents pretty much worldwide for outside the nose. So everything that's available that competes with us or tries to compete with us goes inside the nose. And you really don't want to, put anything in your nose that crushes nasal hairs, reduces breathability. The skin in your nose is the most delicate, so it also creates irritation. It can cause infection. If you're using it to reduce viral droplets or respiratory droplets that carry viruses, you can actually, introduce them into the nasal passage where they grow. So you don't want to do that. But so there's a lot of, like I say, a lot of people that are trying to get into the market, but with us holding the patents outside the market, so we really don't have, there's nobody can do that. But when I first started researching it, there was nothing out there.
And when did you start your research?
I started working on it in 2003.
2003. Okay, so this was before having people start selling on Amazon, before having all these research tools or anything. How did you manage to do research on
Google?
Okay.
Pretty much Google, and even my patents, I wrote my own patents. When I hired a patent attorney, I thought, they'll write your patent for you, and he's like, no, you got to write it, we'll help you tweak it and this and that. But so I just started learning how to write patents and self-educated on it. That's for sure.
Beautiful. How did you find your manufacturer?
Started looking for the top manufacturers in that type of industry, for Band-Aids and roll manufacturing and stuff like that.
Using Google?
Through Google, pretty much, yeah. And had a couple different companies do prototyping for me, and looked at their records and, their clientele and all of that, and chose the best one that I could find.
Yeah, what was that?
And since then I've upgraded, and I'm upgrading to a new manufacturer right now. Actually, it's even got more capabilities. So it's always an ever-going process.
I know it's probably a long time ago, but do you remember what was the cost to get a prototype sample?
I think when I started, it's under $1,500 for all prototyping, and because they actually use lasers and things like that, but having the adhesives made, finding a skin safe adhesive was one of the hardest things to do, because you don't want to prevent an allergy and cause an allergic reaction on the skin at the same time. And people have been wearing these since the early 2000s now, and we've never had one person with an allergic skin reaction. And that's huge. Was selling over 30 million worldwide, and nobody ever having a skin reaction. That makes a big difference, because a lot of people, something I learned later on, have a lot of different types of allergies, and a lot of people have skin allergies, and that's one of the biggest ones. And like I said, so that was one of our biggest hurdles, but I won't even really. Well, you said this is edited, correct?
I'm sorry?
You said this is edited, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so how we started with one of the adhesives was I looked at nipple pasties that the girls used in the strip clubs because they would endure sweat, and I knew
Are we editing this part out, or?
Well, yeah, I don't know. You don't have to, but the whole idea was it's a delicate area,
Gotcha.
and they stick on during sweat and things like that, and that was one of my concerns. So I looked at the adhesives with that, and I looked at medical adhesives, and I kind of got a combination of the two that, and we started testing, prototyping, and all of that. So that's how I kind of came up with the adhesive.
That's really smart. And how many units did you order at first?
25,000.
25,000 was your first order.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's not a big.
That's not when they're so small, and 25,000 sets. That was one box.
Do you remember how much it cost you initially?
Well, let's see if it was, I would say probably around $10,000. Maybe 7,500 to 10,000, somewhere in there.
Nice. And did you run into any big issues with the manufacturer?
I did at one time. So originally, we had them packed in a bandage, what they call a cold seal, just like a bandage would be. And we got some orders in, actually, and some people that wanted to use them, and one of them was NASA, and they wanted to use them for the clean rooms and all of that and everything else.
Nice.
And then we got feedback back. But what happened was they got off-centered, so they were crooked, and all the adhesive was on one side and stuff. And with the bandage packaging on there, you couldn't tell that. So we had to recall them all. And basically, I gave them free samples and stuff, but they kind of blew that opportunity, because that was a huge opportunity. So that's why they're no longer cold sealed. And then we went to a hot seal. So a hot seal, it would be like a condom or something like that, with where they go in a package. And we had them. I even had it where it was clear on one side, but then the problem was, and they stuck to the packaging. So now they're individually packed, hand packed. So they're all hand inspected, put in an insert, and then put in the packaging. So which is a little bit more expensive. People say, they think they're a little bit expensive. They think that they're a 2-cent Band-Aid, but there's not. There's, 7 ingredients that are all put together. The laminate's actually stirred, made, and then dried, and then they're die cut. And what people don't understand is when you're die cutting a product like this, is you have roughly 50% waste, because you're cutting it out of and all that other stuff. You can't reuse that. You can send it for recycling, but not recycling for what we're using. So there's a lot more to it. So like I said, so now they're hand packed and hand inspected, every single one of them, which when they're coming off it's not a intricate, process. Basically, they look at them as they come off, count 7, stick them in the insert, stick them in the bag, seal the bag, put them in the box. So
nice.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you've improved the processing over time.
And we've also, when we started out and when I was on Shark Tank, we only originally had the large one size fits all. And actually my very first ones we made were actually they were white, and they had a white kind of a cottonish filter. Problem we found is that when you put on a nasal filter, and you stop taking in allergens, a lot of times your nose will automatically start running, which is a natural, because now that it's no longer being exposed, it starts flushing itself. Well, when it flushes itself and you have a cotton filter, it'll absorb it and it becomes non-breathable. So we ended up going to a poly style non-woven filter that would clean itself, and that wasn't so white. And the funny thing was I got my first prototypes. I put them on. I was excited. I went to the post office box, and I got them and I put them on, and I was going through a drive-through, and I'm like, wow, so I just kind of felt odd, wearing them. I got these white stickers on my nose, and it was funny. The lady was having my food, and she sneezed, and right then it hit me. I was like, I feel better that I have them on. And then, of course, like I said, over time developed into small, medium, and large. And now we have a filter that won't absorb moisture. Your nose can actually run through it. You can dry it and things like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And now I'd like to get into a little bit of the details of manufacturing, like some of the details like packaging, design, photography, maybe starting your LLC and getting your trademark and so on. How did you find your designer for your packaging and logo?
Originally I did it. I designed it because, when money's tight and, you're trying to start a company, our packaging has changed 3 or 4 times. I'll go back to the original. So originally when I invented it, I called it Cleanos. Cleanose. So clean, because you have a clean nose, right? Yeah. And I went to the store and I bought the clear little baggies and got instruction inserts and put them in there, and the cold seal packaging, put them in there. And then I made stickers on my computer on the labels that said Cleanos and had all of the information on it. And I did that for probably 3 years while I was, working on it. Learned a few different things. But the first one was, backing up actually. So then we had some wildfires here in Florida, and people were requesting them from the University of Florida, from the fire departments and stuff like that. So, and I had some stores that wanted them. So I made some displays, and one of my first lessons of a display. So my displays were probably 3 foot high, 2 foot wide, bright orange, so they stuck out. And I bought the pegs that, they were peg boards, so you got the pegs in them, and they had like 12 rows or 12 pegs on them of the nasal things and stuff. And I take them in, and the guy would, he put it on his shelf, and then you couldn't even see him anymore. You couldn't see the clerk anymore. And I come back in, and I see they're on the back on the beer cooler or soda cooler or whatever else, because it took up so much room. And that was one of my first lessons about counter space and how expensive it is, and and how important it is to So of course that whittled down to a small little box with a pop-up on it that's a display, and as you see in normal stores. But I thought, and it had the ones I made had a rubber nose on it with the glasses, the Groucho Marx glasses. I cut the glasses off and glued the nose on there and put them on there so everybody could see it. That was my idea. And that was, like you say, it's been an education since the beginning. But then it always worried me, because I've read so many nightmare stories of trademark disputes and, IP and all of that. Yeah. So anyway, so I got mail one day, and lo and behold, my trademark got approved for Cleanos. And I'm like, great. 3 days later, after my trademark was approved, I was served papers from Fox and Rothschild, and I don't know who these people are. They're representatives of our company. They're going to sue me for my trademark. So I called my attorney, and I have one of the biggest attorneys in the United States, Holland and Knight. When I researched, I'm like, who's one of the biggest patent attorneys? And make sure I did it right. And so I called them, and he's like, "Oh no, let me back up. I didn't call him. I get a notice in the mail that wasn't served. It was just a regular notice, cease and desist. And I didn't think about it. I got a certified trademark. I'm good to go." So a couple of weeks later, now I get a certified one, and and all this. So that's when I called the attorney, and I said, "What about this?" And he said, "Oh no, you hold the merit." He said, "They're in a different category. They actually invented. There's this company from India that invented a baby nasal aspirator or booger sucker, and they wanted the same name, but they filed a name 2 weeks after I did, and theirs was spelled Cleanoz, so Cleanos. And so he said, well, first of all, the trademark, the Trademark Commission also doesn't issue trademarks or disputes on phonics. So Cleanos and Cleanos will be 2 different names, 2 different categories. I filed first. So I said, I hold all the rights. He said, yep. I said, okay, let's fight them then. He said, okay, well, it's going to cost about $500,000 to fight them in trademark court.
Oh,
He said,
wow.
do you have another extra $500,000? You'll win. He said, but do you? And I said, no. And so the next thing you know, I had to sell them the name and rebrand because I couldn't afford to. They had a lot deeper pockets than me.
Oh my God.
And that is one. Oh, that's nothing compared to what we went through in other instances, but not in the trademark. So then I had to come up with a new trademark, rebrand. Every time I rebranded, I kind of got a different packaging. And then, I was selling in Canada, and they said, the company here really wants a medical looking. So they showed me the colors that most medical products had and stuff. And then, like I said, it just evolved and just getting more and more. And then we tried to make it look more like the website. And it's just come to that. I've had a few people with suggestions, but the majority of it, I did, as far as, coming up with the designs and stuff. And now everybody likes how it is now. And I think I'm sticking with what I got. But then,
so you ended up with First Defense as the last.
Yeah, well, except for I went to China. I had a company fly me to China, and they wanted distribution there. And so that deal didn't go through. Yeah, but I took the contract with me. They signed the contract. They never funded it or nothing. But this other company from China said, yeah, we want it. And so I sold them several million. I think there was four full pallets.
Okay.
And anyway, they get it there and it gets rejected in customs because somebody in China stole my patent. And so we did some research on it, and the picture for their trademark was the front of my contract from the first company I met. They took a picture of my trademark, and then they tried to sell it back to me for $7 million. And they've never used it. But that's what they've done, and I've heard that they did that to Apple. I heard they did that to Starbucks. That's just kind of how China works. But luckily, I had applied for 3 trademarks in China. So in China, we're known as Filter Your Life, nasal filters, because I also own the trademark worldwide for Filter Your Life. It just makes sense, filter yourself, because that was my original conception idea when I started doing research, and I found out that more people die of heart attacks from air pollution than they do from heart disease and everything else. And I just found out that there's 367 billion spent on allergies and stuff like that and everything else. And then my boss had a Ferrari, and he was telling me how many filters are on the engine and everything else. I thought, well, we filter our houses, we filter our cars, we filter everything else. What's more important than our own engine? Why wouldn't we filter ourselves with, having cancer, and you see all of the pollution rates and all that stuff? So that's kind of how it started. So luckily I had that backup. So we had to ship all of the product back, send it back to the manufacturer, have it all cut open, repackaged, and shipped back. So didn't make much on that order.
Right.
That was supposed to be a couple $1 million in profit. Didn't happen.
Logistic nightmare.
Yeah, it was, but we got through it. And, but that's the education, once again, of different things of, these companies and stuff, and not knowing, like I said, it's been an expensive education for me. That's for sure.
Yeah. How much did it cost to package and design your product initially?
It just depends on volume pretty much, but the original orders we had to have, I think our minimum orders were 25,000, and then they went to 50,000 as the price comes down, because you get your discounts on volume, on raw material volumes and stuff like that. But as you see different things change in pricing as far as shipping goes and stuff, you'll get fluctuations, but most of the contract. So generally, on my packaging, sad thing about my packaging is I get my packaging from overseas because I can't get the quality of it here. I've tried to get it the same quality here, and I just can't. And the pricing's so much cheaper, even with the shipping. So but every time I get a new manufacturer and we put their name on the bag or anything else, you're talking new print rollers, because it's on a roll machine that they print off of. So those are $1,000 for each size. They're good for a couple years until they roll one time and they break, and then got to get new ones. And then the dies that cut the material, those go about every year. They're carbide, but they still wear out depending on how many you're producing. So it's a constant, keeping up with the dies and the printing plates and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and then also paying an artist to redo the languages. We've done bags in German, of course, Arabic, couple different types of Mandarin, Cantonese, just different languages anyway. So Persian, and just like I said, Spanish. Every time you do that, it's another expense.
Yeah, I can see that. But roughly, just so we get an idea, for a 25,000 unit order, how much does it cost you to purchase like the packaging for that?
Packaging, like I said, usually I have to. It's funny. I can buy if I buy 25,000, I'll buy 100,000, because
Mm,
if I buy 100,000, it's almost the same price as 25,000.
I see.
Because say they're 5 to 6 cents for 25,000, my bags are probably 2 cents when I buy 100,000. So I always buy extra for the next order, because why not? It just makes more sense. And problem is just the storage, because
Mhm.
our bags take up more room than our product does.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how did you get? When did you first launch on Amazon?
Amazon came to me, I want to say around 2009.
2009. Okay.
2009, and I did a Amazon vendor account, and that's the only thing I've ever done with Amazon is Amazon vendor. I have a couple other distributors that came on as Amazon sellers. There's a side note that, I mean, as we go into it, I guess you can edit this to different parts, but when COVID hit, we skyrocketed. Our sales went crazy. We had one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, one of their subsidiaries, come to us and say, we want to distribute your product. So they ordered 17 million.
Wow.
And so we supplied that. And Amazon orders went skyrocketed. Amazon put in $1.5 million worth of orders within the first month and a half.
Wow.
And this company that took over distributorship never filled them, and never filled one order or any of the orders. They shelved it and then never paid me. So I had to sue them. And when you're suing one of the largest companies in the world, they have a little deeper pockets and they have a little further reach. And I didn't win.
Wow.
Even basically what happened was we sued them, and they showed up and said, Your Honor, we agree with everything he says. We do owe him the money. We didn't spend any money on marketing or anything else, but we're going to countersue him for 30 different things. Well, every time we tried to bring up our case, well, no, we already agreed to that. So you weren't allowed to argue our case. So we were on the defense the whole time. We beat all of the countersuit except for like 3 claims where the judge said, you know what, let's just rescind the contract. They get to keep the product. You pay them back. You give them their money back. And it's like, wow. And it wasn't a judge, it was an arbitrator, an 85-year-old arbitrator. So basically what happened was when they went to pay, when I called them about paying me, I was talking to their CEO. He said, hey, we're not going to pay you. He said, you can take us to court. You'll most likely win. He said, but we're going to drive you bankrupt in the meantime.
Wow.
And he said, take my word for it.
That's scary.
And well, it's once again education. And it's just doing business that, you look at the book Art of the Start and stuff like that, where they stole this patents and things like that. That's exactly what they wanted. They want to shelf us because companies don't want prevention of anything. Not when they're pharmaceuticals and they got stockholders. They want you to use the treatments for allergies. Just like the first company, like I said on Shark Tank, first company I went to, at least they were honest with me. They offered me $3 million just for my patents before they were approved long ago. And I said, okay, what would be the royalty? And they said, there would be no royalty. We're going to shelf it because why would we prevent it for $1 when we treat it for 14? And at least they were honest with me. And I said, no, I'll keep it and I'll keep going. But so that's, like I said, so Amazon has gone just different ways as far as the Amazon vendor. Like I said, through Vendor Central, they were sending me orders probably at one time. I think there was one was 35,000 a day. They were getting up to, and then this company didn't fill them. But so that's how Amazon has that traction. My biggest concern with Amazon is trying to work with them, trying to get things fixed, trying to get people off of it that aren't authorized to sell and stuff like that. Trying to get a hold of somebody at Amazon is not the easiest thing to do in the world.
Yeah, I know it's difficult to get their support. team on.
So,
Man, what a story. Going back, how could you avoid a mistake like that? And how
well,
much
the funny thing was, is,
and how much did it cost you?
well, it cost me $7 million.
Wow.
But before that, so in 2016, okay, so we did several million up to 2016. I had a company come to me and say, a broker, actually, this was a broker, and he said, I got a company that wants to buy your company, and the offer was going to be $20 million in a royalty. They were going to rebrand us under I don't know if it was confidentiality at the time, but well, I guess I could tell you I won't. They have a nasal product out there. Let's put it
Yeah,
that way.
you don't have to say the name.
Anyway, so they wanted to rebrand it under their name, Nasal Screen. And so we got into negotiations, and I signed a contract saying I wouldn't do any big commercial orders or anything, because they didn't want me to brand it anymore the way it was going. So lo and behold, it took almost 2 years of my time up, where we just did local orders just for our own consumers and stuff. And then we got to the white paper, we were getting ready to finish the deal, and they said, we've changed our mind, we sold that division, we sold it. So one of the reasons they sold it was because I have new patents now that actually have for nasal dilation. So what a nasal dilator, basically what it does is you can breathe easier with it on than with it off. And I think if we would have came on the market and they knew that we could have hurt their sale of that division. So they held us up, while as soon as they sold it, then they were like, no, we're not interested anymore. So that was 2 years that they held me up. So I got back in, I sent them a letter saying, hey, I'm going back into business. I'm as far as commercial orders and stuff. So 2018, 2019 started rolling again really well. 2020 comes around, COVID hits, and then I have that headache. So the biggest problem that I think that I face is, I wish the Shark Tank deal would have turned out different, for the simple reason that I did want to go through with the Sharks. I did. I didn't go on there just for the publicity. That fell through because one of the Sharks couldn't get along with the other two, and one of the Sharks told me, Joe, if we don't get along with him now, we're not going to get along with him later. You need to keep going and doing what you're doing. But the reason I wanted somebody like that and stuff on board was so that they had the bigger legal teams, the bigger advisors, because I have lawyers all over the world. And that's the problem. I have patents in Europe, all through Europe, in the Middle East. And it was funny, I was in Dubai, meeting with a company in Dubai, and I emailed my lawyer. I said, where do I send these papers? He goes, oh, don't take them right down here. You got a lawyer there. But so anywhere that in China, we got 2 lawyers in China, 1 in Hong Kong. I got, anywhere you have patents, you have an attorney there. And they're all through different, and they're not with the same. In Dubai, it was the same affiliation, but in the other countries, it's not. And, and then I have a corporate attorney, and then, we have a tax attorney. It's just, that's where partnering with a company or partnering with the right people can help you avoid a lot of that. And that's what I was looking for from the Sharks. And that's where I regret, or not regret, but I just wish it would have, progressed into the deal that we originally wanted.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. There's a lot of complication, and it sounds like
well, and the big guys always push the little guys around. It makes you realize how many people get taken advantage of. They're starting businesses and then lose things. And, I'll never forget. I was seeing a doctor one time for a gastroenterologist, doctor or whatever else, and he said, I was showing him the nasal screens, we were talking about it, and he said, I commend you, that's awesome. He said, I invented this thing. He said that, well, actually, it's one of the surgeries I do. He said it would change this surgery that I do. He said, like, you have no idea. And I said, what are you going to do with it? And he said, nothing. He said, I don't have the balls to take it anywhere. He said, now my brother-in-law, he invented some kind of thing for lawn mowing or whatever else. And he said, he's like you. He's throwing it all out there, just going for it. He said, I can't do that. I got kids in school. I did too. He said, I got all this going on. He goes, I don't have the guts to do it. He said, but I know it would revolutionize what I do. But he said, there's so many people that don't take that swing for that reason, and for those horror stories, and for the costs and everything else. And then when you present it to somebody's stealing it from you, and there's just so many facets that you have to be aware of, or that you become aware of if you do it in the wrong way. You find out in the hard way. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, you do learn the hard way, and I mean, your product sounds like it took off in a big way because there was demand for it.
There is people that are health conscious want to filter their life. I'm leaving Friday for Australia for the big work health and safety show down there. They already had some contracts. They just signed a contract in Cyprus, Greece, and Bahrain. Just shipped to Kuwait. Just shipped to China. Working on a deal for the Middle East. So it's starting to roll again. But the worst thing about that company that shelved us in the lawsuit wasn't don't get me wrong, the money was heartache. I sold everything I own just to fight the lawsuit. But the whole thing about it is that all the business that we lost, I had to start over again, and it took 3 years to get through all of that. And we're just now getting rolling again. And the nicest thing is that now the interest, we're just starting our social media up and everything else, but the interest is coming from everywhere. People are starting to be more conscious. One, after COVID helped a lot because people are more conscious of the air they breathe. But now you got the bird flu out there. You got the swine flu out there. You got the whooping cough that they're just said is becoming an epidemic. You have all of the African dust that's coming over. When they did a study and they said, everybody that was born after, I forget what year it was, and this and that, has some type of Chernobyl dust in them. Not enough to hurt you. Well, that's not enough to hurt you. The African dust isn't, the mercury in the air is not enough to hurt you. But you know what? You pile it all together, sure not good for you. And you look at the cancer rates of where they're at and the carcinogens in the air and everything else. Look at the Middle East. The Middle East is a good example. You talk about Iraq and places like that. Actually, I'm talking to a company right now in Iraq. They've had a war there for over 20, 30 years, and the tanks doing on the ground and everything else. They were telling me how much bacteria and pollution is in their dust. Not pollution. The dust is pollution, but how many different types of particles are in their dust and stuff like that. People are more conscious today, and they're looking for a solution. And the problem is when you put a mask on, first of all, when you wear a mask, unless it's form-fitted, air goes the path of least resistance. So air doesn't generally usually go through a mask, it goes around a mask. And so it goes around the mask, you're getting it in it. And then when you're wearing a mask, you're breathing heavier. So now you're breathing any more of it in. And then they call it tunneling or vacuum effect. You're wearing a mask. Somebody coughs or sneezes into the air. Respiratory droplets, small respiratory droplets, 1 to 5 microns can float in the air for 6 to 8 hours. So normally you might walk right past one of those, right? But if you have a mask on and it's got a vacuum effect, you can actually change the direction because they're so light, and you can suck them in your mask. Guess what? Once you suck them in your mask, it's there. But the same thing with pollutions and everything else. So like I said, and then you ever see how many people you see wear a mask and they put it down over their mouth and it's not covering their nose? China's one of the worst that I see do that. They all wear them over their mouth. Well, they don't understand. It's over your mouth, and now, but going through your nose is the worst place for it to go through, because if it goes in your mouth, generally a particle, or the majority of them, will either hit the esophagus and get coughed back out, or from the weight they'll drop down and get digested. They don't make it up over the trachea into the lungs. So if you can keep them out of the nose, that's a direct line to the lungs. So like I said, so they're actually doing the opposite of what they should be doing, is putting it over their nose. Or then you see the mask go on a construction site and the guy's got it on his head as a sombrero, or he's got it as a chin guard because it's down there, because he can't communicate. You got people on the job that their safety, they can't hear each other with the mask on, and it's too hot or whatever else. There's so many reasons, and it gives them an alternative. And then I do have a lot of people that wear them under their mask as well, because it's just that's your first defense is your nose.
Yeah, I agree. How much of your sales are via Amazon? Is that a small
I
percentage?
would say very minute, probably less than 5%.
Okay, that makes sense because you're selling worldwide and to big consumers in the you know in the
Well, I know I
labor
could do a lot more on
industry.
Amazon. The problem with Amazon for me is so our bread and butter um, sales are the ones that come to the website because I make more on them. I can discount them more. But when you sell them to Amazon and then you pay a co-op fee and you pay the advertising fee, the stocking fee, the shipping fee, and all of that stuff, your profit margins get down so low compared to they're triple or quadruple or even more when you sell direct to the consumer.
Mm.
And so when you, not saying that I love this their system and the simplicity of it, but when you're paying the bills, every dime counts. So until every dime doesn't count, as far as keeping the company alive and going and growing, you have to take that into a factor. I still have people that want to get them like overnight things like that. I do have people that pay me for FedEx overnight, but if Amazon's got them, they can get them to them. So I pretty much
Yeah,
have one gentleman that I sell to pretty much exclusively. He is the only authorized seller on Amazon. But there are a few other ones that are, matter of fact, even that pharmaceutical company that they have a subsidiary on there selling them behind
I
my back.
see.
So,
Nice.
but and then trying to get a hold of Amazon to get them off of there isn't the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, I see you have a lot of are those all your products or are your because I do see First Defense products like there's a liquid product.
No, those are just people that after I did it, they use the name so when you Google it, a lot of times, the searches and stuff. And then
Where
there are a few people that have kind of played on the name.
I see.
Yeah. The only thing we do is the nasal filter or the nasal screens.
I see. Screen by Defense nasal screens. And what's the difference between the one that you're selling for $9 and the $52? Is that a
That would,
package?
that would probably be a different volume amounts.
Okay.
Because like I said, I don't sell on there, but the one
35.
that's $9.98, that's our map pricing. And then some people, they have different lot numbers where they'll sell 6 packs at a time or whatever else.
I see. The count is different.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
And
like you say, that's and then we've actually had 2 companies try to knock it off. Try to do their own product. I had one out of India, and I actually got my patent in India now, so we're going after them. But you can only go after so many people, and that's once again the idea of having a bigger partner. I've been talking to a few different companies, and I do have a podcast coming up with merger and acquisition groups that are all into this podcast. They watch this podcast to see about partnering with the right company that, is if I get the right guarantee of that it's not going to be shelved, because I have so many people that rely on this every day. And I have so many stories of people how it's changed their life. If I get the right company and the right agreement that that's going to be made and be made available, I think I'm to the point where I asked one of the doctors from the University of Florida who's a stockholder of my company and stuff, and he's got world-renowned awards and everything for respiratory and all of this. I said, when do you know when it's beyond you? He said, I'm a high school graduate, dairy farmer. Granted, I learned a lot of insurance and all that stuff. And he said, if you surround yourself with the right people, it's never beyond you. But at the same time, if I think it's time to start looking at the bigger picture and say, who can I partner with? Let them take it over. They have the CFOs, the CEOs, all of that. They have the research and development. And I'm not a one-man band trying to do this, by myself and run this company.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, good luck with that. I mean, that
thanks.
definitely will help you a lot. I'll
The
be
world
honest.
needs it.
What's that?
I said the world needs it. That's the biggest thing. I probably one of my.
It is a pretty unique product, and
probably
I
one
can
of the
see
best
how
examples.
beneficial it is.
Yeah, well, one of the best examples I ever had was I had a lady who called me. I have hundreds of stories, of course, but I have a lady who called me and she was just thanking me left and right. She said, my 9-year-old got to play baseball for the first time thanks to you.
Wow.
And I didn't understand what it would have to do with baseball. And she said, well, he has allergies. And the problem is that he was on 6 different medicines. 3 of them were allergy medicines, but three of the medicines were to combat the side effects of the allergy medicines. One was speeding up his heart, one was hurt and everything else. And he said he's no longer on any medicines. So I'm not worried about the side effects or anything else. He can be a kid again. And she
That's
said, you don't know
amazing.
what that means to me as a parent of what you've done for him. I mean, I've had people, an older gentleman told me he was going to commit suicide because of his breathing problems. And he said, this gave me my life back. He goes, I mowed my lawn for the first time in 3 years. He goes, that might not mean nothing to you. He said, that means everything to me. He goes, I'm 75 years old. And I got to mow my lawn again. He said, that, things like that. So that I got to know that these people have access to it. That, and like I said, it's the world needs it. People need to have that ability to filter because, like I said, it's only getting worse, and it's going to keep getting worse.
That's amazing. I mean, that definitely makes a difference in someone's life.
Doesn't matter to me either way, but this might be one of the, it's a lesson for me. Is I'm not I don't want to say educated enough, but I don't know enough. I grew up before computers and all of that stuff. I don't understand a lot of it. I don't understand the Shopifys and the Amazons and all that stuff and the ASINs. I know what an AI it is now, but I had to learn it and stuff. These other people that know it, if I knew it better, I would be my own seller on Amazon.
Right.
So it's inexperience. It's not having the knowledge to do it and the finances to build that up to that extent. So that's why I'm not, like I say, as a vendor, it was no problem on Vendor Central. They'd send me a PO every Monday and I'd ship it out on Tuesday, and I was paid at the end in 30 days. And that was great, but just knowing how to, and so I might be a customer, or not a customer, a viewer for you guys, learning how to become my own seller. Because that's what I should be, is cutting these other people out. That's really where I should be at. And like I said, I understand what you're trying to do. It's like I said, I just don't have that knowledge. And I've looked to get that knowledge. I've actually been to some of the Amazon meetings that they have locally for, the Amazon meetups, they call it, and all this stuff, trying to get that knowledge. Yeah. But it's just,
Well, that's what we teach. That's what we talk about all day, because it is a big mountain to climb to learn how to use Amazon and everything related to it. But once you learn it, it's not that bad. And we've helped so many people, and especially Travis. He's been doing it for over 8 years. He was similar to you. He started e-commerce with his mom before Amazon. Or before he launched on Amazon, and he was going like door to door and trying different avenues to sell their product. And then he found a lot of success with Amazon, and that's when he changed his entire business strategy. But I mean, I could come back to you and see if we can do something on Amazon, about Amazon or something. So you're saying you sell your product to a company that sells your product on Amazon?
Yes.
So they do that? Yep. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, he's one of my biggest distributors, actually.
That could be a good story, actually.
He sells a lot for me. The biggest thing is like I said, I know that's profit out that I could be making if I was doing it myself, but but like I say, he's got the knowledge I don't.
But that sounds interesting. So so they sell so everything you sell to them, they sell on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. And they how much are they buying from you?
It varies, but before COVID, it was like 70,000 a month.
70,000 units or dollars? Okay.
Units, and they were actually on track to do over 1 million themselves that year. And then that distributor, the company that came in, cut them off as well.
Oh my God.
So, yeah. But once we got through it, I started selling to him again. He's up and running again, but it's just building it back up again.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, I think that might be interesting, actually, to talk about that. When did they start buying from you?
Oh, I think Dan's been buying me for since maybe 2016, so maybe like 8 years ago.
2016. Okay.
Yeah,
And
maybe even a little earlier.
what was their first order? If do you remember
The first order I
approximately?
probably was maybe like 2 cases of each size. So probably about 6,000 units.
6,000 units. And how much were you selling the unit?
Well, I was selling to them for 50% off the map pricing.
So you're
I just
selling
got
it wholesale.
Yeah, I was wholesaling to him. He's gotten down a little bit more than that, but basically I was selling to him for $1 cheaper than I was selling to Amazon
I see. Okay.
because it came out to the same price after Amazon's fees.
And Amazon was buying it from you too?
Yeah, Amazon. Yeah, they've been buying from me since 2011.
Since 2011. Okay.
Yeah,
And that's
the Amazon
Amazon
Vendor Central.
Basics?
What's that?
Is it like sold under Amazon Basics?
Yeah, it was Vendor Central, and they sold and shipped by Amazon.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and they came to me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
They found you.
yeah, they found me.
Okay. What did they say to you? Like they
I just got an email, and actually, then I had a buyer that actually contacted me, said, "I'm a buyer from Amazon. We'd like to offer your price." That's how I got my ASINs and all of that.
Yeah.
Was they issued them to me?
Oh.
They wrote everything and stuff. I didn't have to do any of that. That's why it was kind of like then it got to the point where what is this? What is this? And then Josh, who was my buyer with Amazon, got promoted. And then I didn't have a contact anymore that I could call. So when they asked for stuff, I didn't have the knowledge of, well, I didn't set that up. I didn't set that up. I don't know how that works. So they would send me emails and it would take me forever and I would submit something and it would get rejected. And things like that. It was just, that's crazy. And the funny thing about it is when you get into that, so Amazon, for everything they bought from me, they only bought large because when they started buying from me, I only had large. And then once I no longer had a buyer, I tried to create the new ASINs and all of that stuff for the medium and the small. And every time I put them in, they got rejected. And tried to get a hold of them and try to get it fixed and everything else. It just was a nightmare. So I never did get it fixed. So all of those that they bought, even the ones that they bought when COVID hit, or that they ordered, the 1.5 million that they ordered when COVID hit, those were all just large. Those weren't even the mediums and the smalls.
Oh wow.
Because I didn't have the other SKUs up for them.
So they came back to you during the pandemic and they placed.
Well, it didn't come back to me. I was selling to them all the way up to there.
You were okay.
Oh yeah, no, they. And then, like I said, then I gave distribution rights to that company, and I gave them the Amazon orders, and they said, "Oh, we're not going to fill them. We're going to sell it ourselves on Amazon," and then they never did.
Oh,
and they turned down 1.5 million.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's that's the pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. That's when things kind of took a turn. Yeah. Oh man, that's unfortunate. That is an interesting story, actually. That's
oh, it is. I got a lady that wants to write a book about it. But it's life, and like I say, when you're doing business, it's education, and education's expensive.
Definitely, yeah. Wow. So I'm guessing like you turned into a wholesaler. Like you went from being a brand product to a wholesaler.
Well, we're still a brand product to some extent, but I still wholesale as well. Like and that's what I prefer to, like my distributors that like this one in Australia that I'm going down to do this health show with and stuff. We're the manufacturer and but we're wholesale to them. They're going to be the distributor down there. That was my goal originally, was just to be the manufacturer, work on R&D, and let other people distribute it that knew how to distribute. Because I'll never say I'm an expert in distribution. It's not my forte. It's never been that. I don't have an education in that or experience. Now I got some experience in it, but the whole point of it is there's people that got a lot more experience in it than me, and that know how to do it a lot better and don't have to, I can go on and research something and learn how to do it, but somebody that already knows how to do it, it's, they can do it in 10 minutes. It might take me a couple of weeks or longer to try to figure it out. So that was my whole goal when I originated the idea of just being a distributor, manufacturer, not a distributor, but manufacturer. And like you said, wholesale everything other than our website. And, that was when this company came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to take over everything. We're going to take over your advertising. We're going to do this." I was like, "Oh, great. That sounds awesome. And we're going to make you $100 million this year." I'm like, "Perfect."
Oh my god.
And then,
Oh my god.
that was, it was all in the contract too, but contracts don't mean nothing if you don't have the, the deep pockets to defend them.
Oh my god, that is unreal. And they ended up pushing you to the ground and
Oh yeah.
with
And
lawsuit.
they're not real happy with me because I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I still own the patents. They wanted the patents. They wanted me
Like,
out of business, but
you are
I'm
a
coming back.
survivor.
Yeah, I'm a survivor.
I
Yeah.
love it. Well, hey Joe, I mean, honestly, congratulations. That was an awesome story, honestly. Like, congratulations on all of this.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, you've truly have, created something that's like worthwhile. And
Well,
uh,
that's the funny thing. Everybody said to me was, how are you sticking with us and everything else? And believe it or not, I'm a published author. I wrote 2 books when I had cancer and different things and stuff like that. And they're fiction. I was on a lot of morphine and had some, different things going on because I had it was an 18-hour surgery, and so I was in bed and I couldn't move for a long time because of how they transferred my muscles and all the stuff. I just had to lay there. And anyway,
yeah,
long story short, was I got a Library of Congress number and everything else, and I'm like, oh man, I did something. I left my mark in the world, but it's a story. There's a lot of stories out there, but now with this, I feel like I have left
yeah,
a mark. One of our customers has been our customer since 2011. She's a monthly member, wears them every single day.
wow,
He was sick for almost 15 years. Hasn't been sick one day since.
wow,
Plays tennis again.
amazing.
Things like that. And then, like she says, you don't understand. She goes, you don't understand. I was sick every day with something, whether it
Wow.
was just congestion, nasal drip, or whatever else. She said, but I couldn't play tennis anymore or anything else. And sometimes, when it's really bad, she'll go through 2 sets a day. She said, but I don't care. She said, I got my life back. I'm
Right,
you
right.
know. And when you know that when you hear stories like that, a lady got to attend her son's wedding because she has chemical sensitivities, and she had an allergy attack at her son's wedding, and she left crying, and somebody followed her out and gave them to her, and she said, no, I didn't get to stay for the wedding. And she says, I got to stay for the reception, because she was there's so many people that are allergic to perfumes and stuff, and I didn't know what a plight it was. And now later on I learned that there's thousands and thousands of people that suffer from that.
Yeah,
So like I said, when you know that you can change people's lives and they tell you that, you
yeah,
feel like, hey, I did something.
yeah.
And that's why and that's why I keep fighting. It isn't, that I love the fighting. I don't.
I know.
Just, like I said, I feel like I owe these
Worth
people.
fighting for.
Yeah, I've changed their lives and I owe it to them to keep it going.